Greetings and welcome to Gomantak Tv. Friends, we have a very special guest with us today. The person who has seen it all. He's been in the journalism for last 60 odd years. He has seen regimes from Nehru right up to Modi now. He's written several books. He has traveled worldwide. And he has written extensively on various social, political issues. Besides being a journalist, he's been a political commentator also. Let's welcome Saeed Naqvi. Saeed ji, welcome to Gomantak TV.
Delighted to be here.
I have read a couple of your books earlier, and I also know about the books that you have written earlier. Some of them were like reflections of an Indian Muslim, then the last Brahmin Prime Minister, and the third one being the other, the Muslim in India. All these three books were sort of portraying facts or portraying events which were happening in India. Your fourth book, the latest book that you have come out with, it's a piece of fiction, it's a play. So let's start with your book. What is this book all about?
The question that you are asking is, why after having written straight political books and social, political on the communal situation and the Hindu-Muslim equation, why have you suddenly turned to the fiction now? The answer is very simple. I got the impression that while I was talking incessantly, I was talking continuously, I was talking without any break on the subject, the basic issue I was not being able to communicate it. The reasons were many. You see, there's a great deal of hypocrisy about things that we do not want to discuss. For instance, let me come straight to it, caste. Now, anytime elections take place, you know that this jati and that jati and a combination of the jatis plus the minus and plus all the jatis, you talk about ad infinitum as far as on the jati question. But after the elections are over, the jati is completely forgotten. And then until the next elections come, there is a degree of discomfort of the ruling class and particularly the upper caste to cope with this particular problem. And unless you cope with it, you will get no solution. So what I did was, I created a fiction, a play, in which, now I was going to say very harsh things actually. Now if I said it, you would be throwing stones at me. But he is saying it, and he is saying it to him, and he is answering back. So I fell back, it's a tactic to fall back on this way you can resolve the polemics of the issue more easily. The polemics of the issue are that when at the moment the country is riven, you would imagine that communalism is coming out of our ears. Now, why have you suddenly started hating me? It is, I know that you don't. I know that you do not. But this is being mobilized, you are being mobilized for a certain purpose. Those purposes are two. One is so that the focus remains on the Hindu-Muslim issue and not the Dalit, non-Dalit, upper caste, lower caste issue. That is one. Secondly, there suddenly has come to people's mind a thing called Hindu consolidation. In other words, if we consolidate the Hindus against an enemy, and that enemy, poor enemy, is me. You have targeted me as the enemy, and you damn well know that there is nothing about me that you can hate. Yes. This is it. But it has to be taken to a pitch. You will talk of beef, you will talk of Pehlu Khan, you will talk about halal shops should be shut, you will talk about hijab, you will talk about love jihad. This is a funny thing. Love jihad is a comical concept, you see. So, but love jihad and X number of things to keep the temperature at a certain level. None of this delivers the political goodies that the authors of this kind of orchestration visualize. What delivers is communalism tied to nationalism. In other words, all of this goes on, but when Balakot happens against Pakistan, then you get the election results of 2019. So, now what does that mean? The implication is that you need a perpetual enemy in Pakistan. Now, this is completely off beam. It doesn't stand to reason, because Atal Bihari Vajpayee, who was, according to me, a very deep BJP man, a very deep RSS man, he used to say, listen, you can change everything, but you can't change your neighbors. And this is a completely absurd proposition, according to me, that you are going to be eternally inimical to a country next door because your internal political agenda requires it.
Yeah, but when you talk about your internal political agenda, you hail from an area which is known for its Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb. Rest of India has nothing to do with a kind of communal divide that has been widespread in the north of India. When did it change and why did it change?
And here again you are touching a very sensitive issue, an issue which should be resolved, that in this area where the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, now what has happened is this: when the Nawabs of Awadh created, say last of them, Wajid Ali Shah, he used to play a very portly Radha to Pandit Binda Deen's Krishna. Binda Deen was the great-great-grandfather of Birju Maharaj. So very family. So he was Krishna, this fellow would. Now, he retained who? Wajid Ali Shah retained everything. The entire Krishna legend was retained in Kathak. You see, there's a real story, not an apocryphal one, that Muharram and Holi fell on the same day. What should he do? He went and attended the festival, the observance, because Muharram is not a festival, it's an observance, solemn observance. He went to there and then he came back and he played Holi. Now, Thumri, Tappa, classical, ghazals, art, theatre, all of this flourished. I tell you, these things are, I keep saying them so often that I sometimes feel I'm lying, because it has become a cliche to me. I have been, but I think unless I say them, you will not know. For instance, in my village, I come from a place called Mustafabad, Kasbah, near Raebareli, which is about 80 kilometers from Lucknow. Now, in this Kasbah, they used to sing a Sohar. Sohar is a song sung at childbirth. My mother and my grandmother's favorite Sohar was Allah Miya Hamre Bhaiya Ka Diyo Nandlal. Oh my Allah, give my brother a son like Lord Krishna. The Hazrat Bibi, the Prophet's daughter, is sitting, and evening has come and Ali Sahib has not returned from battle. So she talks to Sugra. Now Sugra is the parrot. Now parrot is a classical, old Sanskritic, Vedic communicator. He is in the old, you have Malik Muhammad Jaisi talking to Sugra. So she is speaking to the parrot and she's saying, dusk has come, Ali Sahab is nowhere to be seen. You go and find him. And if you can't find him anywhere, go to Vrindavan. Now, all of this is exquisite and beautiful. But what these people forgot, that they were creating a beautiful culture which is you call Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb, it was very sincerely done, but it was done in an area which is circumscribed by the Triveni, by the Kashi, by Mathura, by Hardwar, by Rishikesh, by Ayodhya, everything that is important to the Hindu Sanatan Dharma. And in fact, not only Sanatan Dharma, you know something, you would be amazed that the maximum number of songs on Krishna have been written by Muslims, not by Hindus. You'll be amazed.
Yeah.
Maulana Hasrat Mohani, he was in love with Krishna. Now, why that was so is a long story. If you give me 2 minutes, I'll explain this to you also.
Yes.
Because it's something that people don't know. That why this adoration for Krishna and Rama? Ghalib goes to Ayodhya and he says, Ibadat Khan-e Naqusiyanas, Hama na Kaaba-e Hindustanas. This is where they make music out of shank, out of conch shell. And this truly is the Kaaba of Hindustan, says Ghalib. And Hasrat Mohani, hundreds of songs on Krishna and such erotic songs. ये गोकुल का छोरा, ये मेरे ऊपर अबीर गुलाल फेंकता है, एक दिन मैं इसको पकड़ के ऐसा भींचूंगा कि इसकी सारी शरारत टपक पड़ेगी. अब ये टपक पड़ना is a highly erotic concept. Now, why were these people in love with? You see, there are two things. One is because it was lovely. The whole Krishna Leela is lovely. And the other thing is that there was a belief system. In the Quran, there are 124,000 prophets.
Oh.
124,000 prophets, out of which you know about a dozen, their names. The rest are missing. The belief system is that this glorious land cannot have been ignored by the Almighty. So, and they have worked out all sorts of permutations and combinations, and they say Krishna is one of those prophets. Rama is one of those prophets who were bestowed upon this land. You see? So this was the belief system. It has to be investigated and propagated. Now, I'll come back to your answer. The answer is that all of this happened in this exquisite land where I don't know whether there was a degree of assimilation had not taken place the other way around. You see, they had, when all this faded out, you had Yogi Adityanath as the leader, who's completely unaware of all of this. He's unaware, he doesn't know it. And so does the entire ruling elite. In the earlier days, Atal Bihari Vajpayee knew, because I knew him and we used to talk about these things. He was very adoring of these things. He was a very much greater man, yeah. Maaf karna. बहुत बड़ा आदमी था वो. And this lot is completely, but the design is this. Saeed Naqvi has to be targeted so that this caste pyramid does not get too wobbly. You follow? It is not toppled so that this pyramid like this, they rule on top of us. This should not happen. So, target him, that will make the glue that will keep the caste pyramid in some senses of stability.
This is very insightful, in fact, and we'll talk about it, but right now it's time to take a short break. We'll meet after the short break. Don't go anywhere. Keep watching Gomantak TV. Greetings and welcome after the break. We are in chat with famous journalist, political commentator Saeed Naqvi. And just before the break, we have been talking about the Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb and how ignorance has played a great role in forgetting this Ganga Jamni Tehzeeb in the northern part of India. Now, media also has played a great role in strengthening this belief or strengthening this new kind of idea, which is quite divisive according to me. In your opinion, what has changed in the media over the years? You have been a veteran since 1964. So what has changed? What has gone wrong there?
People forget and they imagine that the media was always with us. No. If you go back to a big event like the pulling down of Babri Masjid, there was no media to cover it. There was only Doordarshan. India Today used to bring out a cassette, which they called News Track. In other words, it used to be a magazine every week, which you put in your machine and you watched it at home on VHS.
Yes.
Then 2 or 3 things in the world happened at the same time. The Soviet Union collapsed, all right? So our leaning towards the Soviets, we rushed towards the other side. There was almost an overcorrection towards the Americans. Then along with that came the IMF and the economic reforms of Dr. Manmohan Singh, initiated by P.V. Narasimha Rao. Now, economic reforms generated wealth. When they generated wealth, the generators of wealth needed space for advertising their wealth. So therefore, channels started coming up. This was only because the channels were required, but since there was a compact between for the sake of an example, say between there's Ambani, there's Modi, and in between Chota owners of newspaper and channels. Now, if the compact is between the Prime Minister and the biggest businessman in the day, then the fellow who appears on television, who the hell is he? He is a little pawn in the whole big game. And the big game is being played between them. And if the television begins to ask questions about bread and butter, if you go to the people and say bread and butter issues are going to be raised, then the big business doesn't like it. So it is much more fruitful for them that you talk about ye jati, Hindu Muslim, yahan beef paya gaya, Muslims have nothing, no pastime. The best thing they can do is to pelt stones from their mosques against poor people who are going out in their religious processions. This kind of a thing is built up, and this kind of a thing has a audience. And 2 things happen. You get TRP ratings, and the big business is not bothered by issues of bread and butter, which would apply pressure on them. You see, which it doesn't happen. So therefore, a great deal of the communalism is through our media, and it is so long as it remains in the hands of big capital, the corporates, it will remain like this.
What about the kind of new medium, social media?
It's coming
Can
up.
that be an answer to this big corporate monopoly?
You know something, I have been talking about this to almost to every Prime Minister since not Indira Gandhi. I was too junior to be able to talk to her, but I did speak to Rajiv and to Manmohan Singh. Manmohan Singh openly, he invited a meeting and he announced that my friend Saeed, he's sitting there, Saeed Naqvi, has an idea. What was the idea? The idea was that you sink $1 billion in a media, which will be a multi-purpose. In other words, it will be newspapers, news magazines, television, social media, everything, including a teaching system of bringing youngsters and teaching them the. Now you create a body, a board of trustees of about 21 people. 21 people like Fali Nariman, who are of impeccable credentials. Find 21 of them, or 11 even, and this is the board of trustees which will cushion the editorial from two things, from the government and from the market. Then you will have a real independent media. Now I have been saying this, but the bureaucracy has, various people said very good, but then the bureaucracy doesn't like it. And Manmohan Singh announced it, but then by a wrong means of implementation, it was scuttled.
Tell me one thing, did you feel alienated any time when you were covering events or when you were meeting people?
You see, until the 80s, there was no problem. In fact, I was pampered. I was looked after by, I keep saying this, when I write my memoirs, 4 Punjabis from Lahore, 1 from Sialkot, 1 Marwari, and 1 Kashmiri Pandit who took me around on his scooter and who made me write the first few features. So these are the people who made me. And they are all Hindus. On the one hand, there was this. On the other, there was another side, parallel thing going on. Aruna and I, my wife, when we got the job in the Statesman, we couldn't get a house. So we went from house to house. We went to this house. We signed the bottom line almost, but then the paper was taken away and it was not signed. Now my name came in the way. But again, my friend Kuldeep Nair, who is now in paradise, he and Bikram Singh, they got together. Unhone beda uthaya. They got me the house. And I've never had any problem. You see? So therefore, this tussle between the conscientious secular and the religious and a little bit of zealot, that was there from the very beginning.
You worked in the north as well as in the south. What was your experience working in North India and what was it in the South India? Was the attitude different in South India?
You see, this is a very interesting question, because when I was sent to the South, my friends in Delhi thought that I would go there and sing in a hole and die. And I loved it. I loved it because the people were religious. You see, this is the mistake people make. They were truly religious and therefore truly secular. You see, this is the wonderful thing. They were very, the namam was sacrosanct, and there was they all had idiosyncrasies. Master, he was called. He was master because he was Ramnath Goenka's son, his master to him. So, but he was very good in English, and he was made the news editor in the Chennai Madras edition. Now, a more secular person, I do not know. He very religious and very secular, provided you did not touch him on 2 issues. MS is the greatest singer made by man, by God, and Raja Gopalachari is the greatest statesman man ever saw. So long as you didn't push him on these 2, he was absolutely wonderful. So therefore, I had a very good time in the South. I began to see, you see, this Brahman, non-Brahman thing began to. I had no idea. I suddenly found that, example, Hegde, Ramakrishna Hegde is the Chief Minister. We have agreed in the conference that the story will go. Next morning I wake and the story has not gone. So मेरे समझ में नहीं आता था कि I didn't understand. Then I learned that out of the 13 reporters, 12 were Brahmins. And Hegde was a Brahmin. So you couldn't do a story against Hegde. You follow? No Gundurao, for that matter, in Karnataka. So these were the things I learnt. And so they were very uncomfortable with me up to a point, but once I realized I had read in Lucknow, I understood how far I can push and how far I cannot push.
The last question I want to ask you is, where are we heading? Where are we going with this kind of culture? Are we heading towards a kind of dystopian state?
If they could somehow have Hindu Raj, at least there would be peace at the end of it. The way they are going about it, there is no Hindu Rashtra in the horizon, but there is constant, perpetual turmoil and chaos and communalism. And this is unfortunately the future that I see in front of me. Now, it is the Indian genius that the middle class has come up, and the middle class is, and lots of people have made it financially, economically, in their lifestyles, but the gap between them and the lower is this much, and it is growing. When that point of explosion will come, I do not know.
So are we going to be another Sri Lanka?
You see, I tell you what will happen. We are too big a country. So Sri Lanka, will it happen in India? No, it will not happen. Will it happen in Tamil Nadu? Will it happen in one of the states? It could happen piecemeal like that. After all, don't forget that in 1957, we had the first communist government in the world through the ballot box in Kerala, 1957. And immediately Nehru and his daughter, both of them got together and had it dismissed, because that was part of the agreement that they had come to power on, that you have to keep the country safe against communism. Next time we'll have a big gas session.
Yes, very much, very much. In fact, there are lots of questions I wanted to ask you, but there is no time and we have to wind up here. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for giving us insights into the history, into the culture of India, as well as the geography, because you described about your experiences in the north as well as in the south. So once again, I thank you, and we wind up here, but you don't go anywhere. Keep watching Gomantak TV.